I'll start by saying something few people are comfortable admitting: I despise my cousin with every fiber of my being. Ricardo and I grew up like brothers, our lives intertwined since childhood, which made his betrayal cut deeper than any knife. Greed transformed him from family into a monster, someone who consciously destroyed our bond, stole the legacy my father built with his own hands, and pushed me to the brink of financial and emotional ruin. For years, he enjoyed a life of luxury, an opulent existence built on my pain and my sweat. He truly believed he had gotten away with it, that his crime would remain buried forever. But fate, with its ironic sense of humor and timing that borders on perfection, had one last card to play. The same type of document he used to destroy me, to humiliate me, was what the universe, years later, placed in my hands and gave me the chance to have my revenge. My father was more than a good man, he was an artist. A master carpenter whose passion for wood was almost poetic. He started our company, a modest yet respected custom furniture workshop, from scratch. My childhood was a symphony of cedar and oak scents and the constant sound of saws and sanders. I grew up in that environment, learning every detail of the craft, not out of obligation, but out of admiration. Ricardo, my cousin, was also part of this landscape. After his own father, my uncle, abandoned us and disappeared from our lives, my father took him in without hesitation. He treated him like a second son, offering him not just a job, but a purpose. He taught him the profession, gave him a place at our table and in our hearts. The three of us, for a long time, were a cohesive team, a true family. When my father's health began to fail, he made sure to leave his wishes absolutely clear, so there would be no doubt. In his will, drafted with the same precision with which he worked the wood, he named me as the majority heir and his natural successor in commanding the company that we had, side by side, turned into a prosperous business. For Ricardo, he left a very generous sum of money, an amount that would give him an excellent start in any venture he chose, as well as a minority share in the company, a gesture of deep gratitude for his years of service and loyalty. My father firmly believed this was the fairest way to honor each person's contribution. I agreed, with a heavy heart for the impending loss, but at peace with his decision. Ricardo, however, had other plans. The moment the will was read, the man I knew, the brother I loved, evaporated. In his place, a cold, distant, and frighteningly calculating figure emerged. His eyes, which once shared laughter with me, now measured me with a greed I had never seen before. He contested the will immediately, claiming that my father, in his final months, was already senile and had been manipulated by me. To him, the division was an insult, a disrespect to his dedication. He dragged me to court, with a petition demanding exactly 50% of the company. My lawyer, an experienced man, was confident. The will was a solid document, signed, witnessed, and authenticated. It was, in theory, unassailable. But then, disaster, in a way I could never have predicted, struck. The original will, the only physical proof of my father's wishes, the document that was kept in the office safe, simply disappeared. The search was frantic and desperate. We turned over every drawer, every file, every forgotten corner of the office. But the document had vanished without a trace. The only paper that remained was an old draft, an initial sketch we found in a forgotten folder. It was unsigned, had no witnesses, and its language was dangerously vague, mentioning only a future division of assets to be decided by the family. It was useless to me, but in the hands of Ricardo's cunning lawyer, it became a powerful weapon. In front of the judge, my cousin, with tears in his eyes, put on the performance of his life. He swore that this draft was the only document he knew of, the only proof of my father's true intention. He painted the final version I described as a fabrication of my own, a fraud to deprive him of his rights. I looked at him, at the man with whom I had shared secrets and dreams, and saw a complete stranger. I knew, with a certainty that chilled me to the bone, that he had stolen the original. But it was my word against his, and I had no way to prove it. I was caught in a perfect trap. The judge, a man who could only rule based on the facts presented, was faced with a complicated situation. on one side, a son with an allegedly missing will, on the other, a grieving nephew with a physical document, however imperfect, and an emotionally charged testimony. The result was a devastating legal settlement. To avoid a prolonged legal battle that would drain every last cent from the company and lead me to total bankruptcy, I was forced to accept. I had to sell valuable machinery, part of our stock of noble wood, and other company assets to raise the required amount. I handed Ricardo a check that represented almost 40% of the value of everything my father and I had built. He took the money without even looking me in the eye. The next day, a "coming soon" sign went up on the building across the street. He used my father's money to open a competing company, luring away our best clients with promises of lower prices and our most experienced employees with higher salaries. He didn't just want his share, he wanted to annihilate me. The following years were a blur of incessant work and quiet despair. While Ricardo became a prominent figure in the city, his picture in social columns, his company on billboards, I sank into debt and exhaustion. I had to sell my apartment to inject money into the company. I traded nights of sleep for long hours in the workshop, often doing the work of 3 people. Every paid bill was a small victory, every day my father's workshop remained open was an act of defiance. Resentment was a constant companion, a burning ember in my chest. I saw his success, the luxury he flaunted on social media, the house with a pool, the imported cars, the vacations in paradise, and all of it had been bought with my pain, with the destruction of my father's legacy. But I didn't give up. Motivated by his memory, by the honor of his name, I carried on. I focused obsessively on what Ricardo had forgotten: artisanal quality, personalized service, honesty. Slowly, client by client, order by order, I began to rebuild what he had tried to demolish. It was a slow, painful, and lonely process, but the reputation for integrity that my father had built began to flourish once again. Years passed in that exhausting routine. My company, though much smaller than it had been in its glory days, had become solid. I had a small but loyal team and a clientele that valued quality above all else. I had found a new kind of peace, a tired peace, forged in resilience. Meanwhile, Ricardo's empire, built on a foundation of aggressive marketing and production shortcuts, began to show cracks. The rumors in our professional circle spread like wildfire: he was in debt, delivery deadlines were constantly missed, and the quality of his furniture, once impeccable when made under my father's supervision, was in freefall. He had expanded too quickly, spending more than he earned, in a blind pursuit of status. I listened to these stories with a calculated distance, a bitter satisfaction that I tried to suppress. And then, on a rainy Tuesday afternoon, fate, after a long slumber, finally decided to step in. My phone rang. It was a number I didn't recognize. I answered with my usual professional greeting. On the other end of the line, an older voice, familiar, but one I hadn't heard in years. It was a close friend of my father, a man I admired and who, by one of life's coincidences, had become a credit manager at one of the country's largest banks. His voice was serious, devoid of any triviality. "Lucas," he said, his tone urgent. "I need you to come to my office as soon as you can. It's about Ricardo. And I really think you're going to want to see this with your own eyes." My heart, which for years had been beating at a slow and steady rhythm of resignation, pounded. A chill ran down my spine. What could be so important? Arriving at the bank, he led me to his private office, closed the door, and offered me a coffee that I could barely hold, my hands were shaking so much. He explained the situation. Ricardo, in a desperate act to save his company from imminent bankruptcy, had applied for a gigantic business loan. An amount that required a full audit and the submission of a vast amount of historical and financial documents. In his arrogance and haste, Ricardo didn't bother to filter the files. He simply handed the bank an external hard drive with a backup of practically all the digital files from his professional life, old and new. My father's friend, knowing our painful family history, felt something was amiss. Out of loyalty to my father's memory, he decided to do a deeper dive into the files, beyond what was necessary for the loan. He opened a folder on his computer. The folder's name was simple, almost innocent, Legal Docs, Old. And inside it, among dozens of other files, was one. A single PDF file with a soul-shaking name, Final Will, Dad. My eyes locked on the screen. With a click, he opened the file. And there it was. It wasn't a draft. It was a high-resolution scanned copy of the original will. The same document that had mysteriously disappeared. There was my father's signature, shaky but unmistakable. The signatures of the witnesses. The official notary seal. Everything. Ricardo, in an act of monumental stupidity, had kept a perfect digital copy of the crime he committed and, years later, had voluntarily delivered it into the hands of a bank. In that instant, looking at the image on the screen, I didn't feel a burst of joy. It was something much deeper. I felt a tremor that started in my feet and traveled up my body, a wave of vindication so overwhelming it left me breathless. The proof. The smoking gun I had dreamed of having for so many years, the missing piece in the puzzle of my pain, was right there, glowing on a computer monitor. My friend printed the document and also saved it to a flash drive, which he handed to me with a solemn gaze. "Do what you have to do, Lucas," he said quietly. "Your father, wherever he is, would have wanted this." My first move upon leaving the bank was not to call my old civil lawyer. It was to go directly to the Financial Crimes Police Department. With irrefutable proof in hand, the situation changed drastically from an old inheritance dispute to multiple crimes, procedural fraud, perjury, and forgery. I presented the scanned document, the sworn testimony of my friend from the bank, and all the documentation from the previous court case. The look on the detective's face as he compared the real will with the court records was one of disbelief and indignation. A criminal investigation was opened the same day. When Ricardo was notified and his assets were preemptively frozen, his world collapsed. He called me dozens of times. I didn't answer. He then started sending audio messages, his voice alternating between crying, pleas for forgiveness, and offers to return the money. He said he was young, stupid, that he didn't know what he was doing. I listened to the first message and deleted it. I didn't reply to any of them. I just turned off my phone and let the gears of justice, which had crushed me for so long, now turn in my favor. For the first time in almost a decade, I slept through the entire night, a deep and dreamless sleep. The legal process that followed was long, but the outcome, this time, was a certainty. With the digital proof and the testimony of the bank employees, Ricardo's defense disintegrated. He was found guilty on all charges. His sham empire, built on dishonor, crumbled like a sandcastle. The court not only forced him to repay me every cent of the value he had stolen, adjusted for years of inflation, but also sentenced him to pay heavy compensation for moral damages and for all the financial losses his unfair competition had caused me. He lost the company. He lost the luxury house. He lost the cars and the status. He lost everything. The verdict also completely annulled the previous legal settlement, restoring to me the legal ownership of 100% of my father's company, exactly as his original will had intended. Today, the company that bears my family's name is stronger than ever. I was able to rehire some of the old friends he had taken, and together, we are expanding the business in an honest and sustainable way, based on the quality my father always prized. I heard that Ricardo moved to a distant city, works a low-wage job, and lives an anonymous life. Some distant relatives have accused me of being cruel, of being unable to forgive. They will never understand. My fight was never about the money. It was about the truth. It was about clearing my father's name and honoring his legacy. My revenge wasn't watching him fall, it was my own rise. It was restoring the justice he tried to bury. And every day, when I walk into the workshop and smell that familiar scent of wood, I feel my father's presence beside me. And I know that, finally, he can rest in peace. That, for me, is the only victory that truly matters.